On Thursday, May 26, 2022, 32-year-old Armando Barron was convicted of murdering his wife's coworker in a fit of extreme jealousy. Barron shot and killed 25-year-old Jonathan Amerault in a park just across the Massachusetts state line before forcing his wife to decapitate him. The motive the state provided for the murder was rage and fury after Barron realized his wife, 33-year-old Britany, had been messaging the victim on Snapchat. At one point during the trial, his wife testified as to how Armando assaulted her and demanded that she kill Jonathan.
Do it. Shoot him.
What did you tell him back?
No.
Did you say whether you could do this?
I was like, I can't. Yeah, I can't.
Britany says he then ordered her to stand on his throat.
And I could hear John struggling, like he was trying to breathe.
Britany says Amerault begged for his life and hers, promising to never talk or see her again. Armando, she says, was undeterred.
And John said, what? He said, look at her. Do you still think she's pretty? And John looked at me. He says, yeah, I do.
Marriage can be the source of some of life's most enjoyable experiences. Unfortunately, however, it can also be the source of one of life's most difficult stressors, infidelity. Estimates suggest that over 25% of married men and 20% of married women engage in extramarital affairs over the course of their relationships. Adultery can have serious negative consequences for those involved. Not only may infidelity lead to relationship distress and decreased relationship satisfaction in both partners, but it is also a strong predictor of divorce. Additionally, the victims and perpetrators of infidelity also frequently experience such negative outcomes as low self-esteem, enhanced risk of mental health problems, guilt, and depression. In extreme cases, according to one study reported in the Journal of Women's Health titled Sexual Infidelity as Trigger for Intimate Partner Violence, jealousy is often used as a strategy by perpetrators to control domestic violence victims and as a red flag for homicidal behavior. Jonathan Amerault was born in Rangeley, Maine on January 27, 1995. He was raised and educated in Milford and graduated with honors from Rochester Institute of Technology, class of 2018, with a Bachelor of Science degree in biomedical engineering. He worked for Teleflex Medical as a biomedical manufacturing engineer. He was an avid sports fan and had a passion for the outdoors, whether it was hiking, snowmobiling, skiing, or riding an ATV. He was an active member of the region's hiking community, often sharing advice and stories from his endeavors on social media. He had climbed 66 of the region's 67 mountains over 4,000 feet, including all 48 in New Hampshire. In addition, he had also hiked all but one of the 100 highest peaks in New England. For Jonathan, who had recently developed feelings for a married coworker, there was just one more hill to climb. Britany and Armando met when they were kids in New Mexico. They married in their teenage years and eventually moved to Jaffrey, New Hampshire to build a life together. Britany worked full-time to support the family as a machine operator, while Armando stayed at home with the kids. Armando may have had some legal or financial difficulties as he did not possess his own consumer checking account or vehicle registered in his own name. According to sworn testimony, their marriage was strained during the year leading up to the murder. Britany was no longer in love with Armando. On September 12th, 2020, she built up the courage to ask for a divorce, and Armando responded by striking her in the face. 1 week later, on Saturday, September 19th, he went through her phone and found a series of flirtatious messages on the app Snapchat between his wife and her coworker, Jonathan Amerault. Just 2 days later, Jonathan was reported missing. When 25-year-old engineer Jonathan Amerault failed to show up for work at Teleflex Medical on Monday, September 21st, his mother, Miss Amerault, became concerned. She had not heard from him in nearly 2 days, so she contacted his employer, who stated that not only was he absent, but they hadn't heard from him at all. Miss Amerault reached out to the Keene, New Hampshire Police Department and requested a welfare check at his residence at 21 West Diane in Keene. Officers arrived at the scene and immediately noticed his gray Subaru Impreza was not in the driveway. They conducted a welfare check, but were not able to locate him. Officers subsequently reached out to Jonathan's employer, Teleflex Medical, and learned that Jonathan never showed up for work on Monday as scheduled. When asked if they were aware of any unusual conduct among employees, Teleflex mentioned that a coworker of Jonathan's, Britany Barron, also did not report for work that morning. However, unlike Jonathan, Britany did make contact with Human Resources staff that morning to inform them that she would not be at work and was going to resign. Teleflex had reason to suspect that Jonathan and Britany may have been in a relationship with one another, despite Britany's married status. With this information, detectives headed to Britany's home at 63 Main Street in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. Once there, they met Britany's mother-in-law, who told detectives that her son Armando was hiking in northern New Hampshire with Britany while she stayed at home to watch the children. She indicated that Armando and Britany lived next door. Officers took a report and headed back to the station. During a patrol on 10:20 p.m. Monday evening, officers saw Armando's 2008 Jeep Patriot parked at 63 Main and stopped to make contact. The Jeep was registered to Scott Rikas, Armando's mother's boyfriend. The officers asked Armando, "Where's your missing wife?" And he said that he was last with her in the overnight hours of Saturday going into Sunday around 2 a.m. Armando claimed she told him that she was going camping with friends, so he dropped Britany off on the side of the road at Temple Mountain in Temple, New Hampshire. He went on to say that he was despondent over the state of their marriage and decided to just drive around, not wanting to go home to his children in his current state. Officers were startled when he told them he decided to drive 193 miles one way to Errol, New Hampshire, only to turn around and go back home. He said that he talked to Britany off and on from early Sunday until 7 a.m. Officers documented the encounter, and the investigation continued. Meanwhile, the Keene Police Department spoke with a friend of Britany's who showed them group text messages from 11 a.m. Sunday to 4 p.m. Monday. The text messages included Britany talking about not being able to see her children anytime soon, starting a new job, and starting all over in New Mexico where her sister lives. The messages also state she told Jonathan she could not speak with him any longer and that she was taking space from Armando. Britany refused to tell her friend her location. On Tuesday, September 22nd at around 8 a.m., two hunters who had recently set up a bear hunting bait site in Annette Wayside Park drove their truck to the bait site to make sure no people were there. When they arrived, they noticed a tent, so they blew their horn, and a woman came out of the tent with a small dog. They noticed she was wearing sunglasses to cover her eyes. They told her they had a bait site some 100 yards away, that there was no overnight camping on the property, and that she needed to pack up and leave. The woman claimed that she was not aware of the hunting spot or the overnight camping restriction. After they left the woods, the hunters called the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department to report the violation. Later that same day, two Fish and Game officers located the campsite reported by the hunters. When the officers approached the campsite, a dog began barking. Britany emerged from a beaten-down path to the right of the tent. They immediately observed that she had a pistol in a pouch on her midsection. The officers also noticed something covered by a large brown tarp. The tarp had sticks and branches on it in what appeared to be an effort to camouflage an object under it. The officers informed Britany that she needed to pack immediately as she was trespassing. While she packed her belongings and cleared from the campsite towards an officer's vehicle, she muttered, "I'm in big trouble." At the same time, officers observed drag marks in the mud, and one of the officers discovered a second brown tarp, this one in the shape of a human body. Officers detained Britany, placed her into handcuffs, and she was later transported to the Berlin Police Department for questioning. Officers then returned to the campsite and lifted part of the first brown tarp. It was revealed to be Jonathan's gray Subaru. The second brown tarp was lifted, and it revealed a decapitated human body. They quickly apprehended Armando, and he was placed under arrest, pending trial.
Her husband, Armando Barron, is now on trial for murder. He suspected his wife's 25-year-old co-worker, Jonathan Amerault, who was nicknamed Abercrombie because of his good looks, was flirting with her. Prosecutors say Barron beat his wife after he found text messages that she had exchanged with Amerault. Then he lured the co-worker to a New Hampshire state park and shot him, according to prosecutors. Britany Barron says she was forced on pain of death to cut off the victim's head. She testified that her husband wanted the victim decapitated so there'd be no dental records to identify the body.
What was the defendant doing while you did that?
Watching me do it.
Britany Barron denies she was having an affair with Amerault. She pleaded guilty last year to falsifying evidence and agreed to testify at her husband's trial.
Under sworn oath and penalty of perjury, Britany Barron testified against her husband and recounted the following sequence of events. On Saturday, September 19, 2020, just 1 week after she had asked for a divorce, husband Armando went through her cell phone and discovered flirtatious messages between she and Jonathan Amerault. It was clear the two had been having an affair. He then confronted Britany and an argument ensued. It escalated to physical violence as Armando struck Britany about the face and head multiple times, most of it happening in the bathroom. She sustained injuries to both eyes, and her nose was bleeding. He then brought her to the bed and continued to punch her in the face. He pulled out a gun and jammed it into her mouth, fracturing a lower front tooth. In the overnight early morning hours, Armando then used her phone as cover, pretending to be Britany, to text Jonathan and lure him to Annette Wayside Park. When Jonathan appeared at the park, Armando ambushed him and violently assaulted him. He then took a handgun and placed it partially into her hand and demanded that she shoot Jonathan. When Armando realized she would not shoot, he removed the gun from her hand and then ordered Britany to place her foot on Jonathan's throat in order to kill him. She complied but did not apply much pressure. Therefore, Armando forced Jonathan at gunpoint to get into the backseat of his car. He then ordered Britany to cut Jonathan's wrists with a small blade, which she did. Armando instructed Britany to get into the driver's seat as he began to climb into the front passenger seat. Once Britany was seated, he turned to Jonathan and quickly fired 3 shots, once in the head and twice in the chest. He then instructed Britany to go back to their house to pack for camping. After she packed, he ordered Britany to drive Jonathan's Subaru with Jonathan's body in it towards Errol, to an area where they had camped numerous times. Armando followed closely behind in his Jeep. He assured her that once the sun came up in the morning, she would be forgiven. Once in Errol, he stopped at a general store and, using Britany's debit card as he did not possess his own, purchased 2 tarps, lighter fluid, a container of scrubbing bubbles cleaner, and a shovel. They then went into the woods to make a campsite where Armando began to dig a grave. He ordered Britany to cut off Jonathan's head so that Jonathan could not be identified through dental records. Fearing Armando, Britany proceeded to remove Jonathan's head using a saw left at the campsite and a smaller blade to finish the cut. The head was wrapped, placed in a grave, and covered with dirt. Armando then told Britany to wrap Jonathan's body in a tarp and dig a grave for it while he returned to the store. He told her he intended to drive to Keene and use Jonathan's phone there to send messages indicating he was okay. He returned shortly thereafter and told Britany that his mother said police were looking for her. He destroyed Jonathan's phone and demanded that Britany send messages from her cell phone stating she was okay and would be gone for a while to clear her head. Armando drove Britany back to their campsite. He told Britany he had to go back to the house and told her she better have the disposal of Jonathan's body completed by the time he returned. He left the campsite in his 2008 Jeep Patriot, but before he did, he had left Britany a handgun for use against wildlife and then told her to hide it afterwards. Britany led investigators back to the area where Armando ordered her to destroy Jonathan's cell phone. It was described as very rural. After Britany's interrogation and statement of events, it was determined that probable cause existed to believe that Armando had committed second-degree assault in the strangulation of Britany, and that their 9-year-old daughter, as perhaps the only witness to the assault, was in great danger. Apprehending Armando became priority number one. Investigators immediately put out a BOLO alert and pinged Armando's cell phone. The data indicated Armando switched vehicles from the Jeep and was headed north towards the Errol area. At 7:25 p.m. the same evening, a detective left a message for Armando to call, and Armando returned the call from a different number. The detective explained that he was helping with the investigation into his wife's disappearance and asked Armando if he would mind coming down to the police station to assist him. Armando became defensive and said he didn't want to, stating, "I don't understand. I've been fired from jobs many times because I just didn't show up, and no one came looking for me like they're looking for Britany." The detective was taken aback and explained, "We have a missing person case. We need to physically see her to make sure she's okay. We can't just take your word for it." Armando claimed he had last talked to Britany on Monday at 5 p.m. He said he couldn't come to the station to speak about his wife's disappearance because he had plans to go camping. He stated the reason he was taking his 9-year-old daughter to the campsite was to explain to her that he and her mother may be getting a divorce. The detective replied, "Okay, why don't we meet halfway in Bristol?" But Armando said no because he purportedly didn't want his daughter to see him talking to police. He then agreed to drive to Jaffrey, but stated it would take him at least 2 hours to get to the police department. He never showed up. Detectives learned that instead of coming to Jaffrey as agreed, the phone was tracked headed in the opposite direction through Franconia, indicating he had no intention of meeting with officers in Jaffrey. Armando's Jeep was located by officers in an unrelated employee parking lot. It was taken in and secured by the state police as they sought a warrant to conduct the search. On September 23rd at 4 a.m., officers headed to the Barron residence to secure the building and to conduct a search.
I got it.
Police department, search warrant! Open the door! Police department, search warrant! Open the door!
Move.
Upon knocking, Armando's mother answered the door. She told officers that she believed Armando was out stockpiling food due to COVID-19. She said that around 10 a.m. the previous day, Armando and his 9-year-old daughter went grocery shopping at several stores. While searching the residence, officers realized that Scott Reekes' other registered vehicle, a gold 2008 Toyota Tundra, was missing from the Main Street residence. Officers communicated this message to dispatch, and shortly thereafter, a vehicle matching the description was spotted and pulled over. Upon approaching the vehicle, an officer discovered Armando operating the vehicle, with his 9-year-old daughter as passenger. In plain view, he could observe items such as loose soil, bags of quick-dry concrete, bags of topsoil, a shovel, and blue tarp, but no groceries or food. Armando was quickly placed under arrest for the assault of Britany Barron. He was taken to Troop F Barracks in Twin Mountain, New Hampshire. He presented with scratches and dried blood on his right wrist and forearm. He was Mirandized, but chose to invoke his right to counsel. Britany's 9-year-old daughter was interviewed by a forensic interviewer who asked what she observed between her parents on Saturday the 19th. She said at one point the two began arguing in the bathroom, however, she did not witness anything as her grandmother moved her to the other side of the apartment. On September 23rd, Britany led investigators to where Armando assaulted and shot Jonathan. Investigators located the area inside Annette Wayside Park and discovered several items from Jonathan's vehicle, including his credit cards, garage door opener, and his identification. They also found Jonathan's head buried near the campsite. On September 24, 2020, an autopsy was conducted by New Hampshire Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Jenny Duval. She noted several injuries, including bruises to the inside of Jonathan's mouth and face, and a shoe impression on the right side of his face. The death was ruled a homicide, and cause of death was gunshot wound to the head.
Back in September of 2020, the defendant terrorized 2 people. One of them he beat and bloodied. The other he murdered. On September 19th, 2020, 3 people went into the woods that you all walked through. One of them was tricked into going there. One of them was forced at gunpoint into those woods. One of them, him, the defendant, he went there to hurt and to kill. The one who was forced into those woods was Britany Barron, the defendant's wife. This is how Britany left those woods. She left beaten, she left bruised, and she left bloody. These pictures were taken days apart. You can see the swelling going down. You can see the bruising, the hemorrhaging in her eyes. She was beaten, she was bloody, and she was terrified. The person who was tricked into going into those woods was beaten too, but much worse. These diagrams were made at Jonathan Amerault's autopsy. They show the injuries the defendant inflicted to Jonathan's head after the defendant beat him, cut him, and stomped on his head. On the diagram on the left, every one of those marks is a separate injury. Injuries to the front of his head, to his face, to the left side of his head, to the right. And to the right, that's an x-ray of Jonathan's head. Those 2 white dots you see are the bullets that he put into Jonathan's head before they left. As for the defendant, you may be wondering what he looked like when he left the woods that night. That is how the defendant looked. He looked just like he does right now. Not a single bruise, cut, or scratch on his face. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in this case, these pictures, all of that and more, they tell you the story. They tell you who was beat, who was doing the beating. They tell you who had the gun. They tell you who was in control. They show you what this case is about the defendant's rage, about his jealousy, about his control. That's why the defendant assaulted. That's why the defendant tortured, and that's why he murdered.
The wrong person is on trial for the murder of Jonathan Amerault. You are sitting here to determine the guilt or innocence of Armando Barron, the man the prosecution and police have accused of murdering Jonathan Amerault. The real murderer did not have to go through a trial. The real murderer has not had to face the terrible facts of this brutal, senseless, and vicious murder. The real murderer never faced a jury. The real murderer was not even charged in Jonathan Amerault's death. In fact, you are going to hear testimony from the real murderer during this trial. The state is going to ask you to believe every claim she makes and to convict Armando Barron largely based on her testimony. Her name is Britany Barron.
We're gonna message your little boyfriend.
Britany Barron testified Wednesday about the plot her husband laid out in September of 2020 to lure Jonathan Amerault to a park. Armando Barron allegedly used her phone to message him.
At one point, he stomps on his face.
Britany described a relentless assault when the 25-year-old engineer arrived, and then the moment Armando allegedly forces her to join in.
Kill him. Do it. Shoot him.
What did you tell him back?
No.
Did you say whether you could do this?
I was like, I can't. Yeah, I can't.
Britany says he then ordered her to stand on his throat.
And I could hear John struggling, like he was trying to breathe.
Britany says Amerault begged for his life and hers, promising to never talk or see her again. Armando, she says, was undeterred.
And John said, what? He said, look at her. Do you still think she's pretty? And John looked at me. He says, yeah, I do.
Britany says her husband forced John Amerault into the hatchback of his own car headfirst. John's last words were, "I thought you were going to let me live," before Armando shot Amerault 3 times.
And John says, wait, I thought you were going to let me live. And Armando said, yes, that means both of us liars.
The jury, Your Honor.
Seated, everyone. So I understand that the jury's rendered a verdict, and now my clerk will take the verdict. Mr. Barron, you should stand.
If you would face the jury, Mr. Barron. Would the foreperson of the jury please stand up? Madam Foreperson, case 213-2020 CR 308, has the jury reached a verdict?
We have.
How say you in charge number 1857629C, charging the defendant Armando Barron of first-degree murder? Do you find the defendant Armando Barron guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
You find the defendant guilty?
Yes.
So say you all, ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Yes.
Madam Foreperson, with respect to charge ID 1857643C, charging the defendant Armando Barron with kidnapping, do you find the defendant Armando Barron guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
That is guilty?
That is guilty.
So say you all, ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Yes.
Here we are again. I see you ain't wearing a suit today. I guess that doesn't help in this case. It's official. You are a murderer, a butcher, leech. In other words, I won't use with respect to the court today. You're a coward. You had to ambush and attack John with knives, machete, guns to take him down. A wife beater. Disgusting, despicable. You mentioned to John you have a revolver called the judge. Now we have another judge here today who will decide your miserable future. I saw that you bought fast-setting concrete also, mix, and never got to use it. But don't worry. Where you're going, you will be surrounded by plenty of concrete to bang your head against in frustration with being caught. The only good thing I see about all this heinous crime is that you are not 40 years old, 50 or 60, but only 30 years old. You have a long, long time to fade away and rot in prison.